Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into some really cool research on liver health.
Yeah, we're talking about a potential treatment that honestly you might already have in your pantry.
Seriously. Turmeric, it's everywhere, right? But what we're interested in is something called tetrahydrocurcumin, or THC.
And before everyone starts getting any ideas, this THC, it's a metabolite of curcumin.
Right, totally different thing. We're talking about its potential for treating non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, especially NASH, which is, the more serious form.
And you found some really fascinating papers on this.
Yeah, two actually. One's a super recent study just came out looking at THC's effect on NASH, but in rats.
And the other one I saw, it's a broader review from July 2024, exploring all these different nutraceuticals for managing NAFLD and NASH. Exactly. So we're going to unpack these papers, see what they tell us about THC, like could this be a real treatment option? And of course, we got to talk about this. Is this something you should be asking your doctor about?
Absolutely. Always a good idea to loop them in.
Okay, so this rat study, really interesting stuff. They basically found that THC seemed to revitalize the rat's livers.
Yeah, they saw some significant improvement in those key markers of liver health. Like, we're talking reduced fat buildup.
Which is huge with NAFLD, right?
Absolutely, that's the core issue. And it wasn't just that they saw inflammation markers going down, even oxidative stress was reduced.
So it's like hitting it from all sides.
Exactly, and what's really exciting is how they think it's working. It seems like THC might actually be boosting something called lipophagy. It's like, imagine your body has this internal cleaning crew for fat.
So instead of a mop and bucket, it's like tiny little garbage trucks in your cells, specifically going after those excess fat droplets.
Perfect analogy. And in NFLD, those garbage trucks are stuck in traffic, right? THC seems to clear the way.
Okay, I like where this is going. So how's it doing that?
Well, they found that it specifically acts on this pathway called mTORC1-TEVB. Now, that sounds super complicated, I know, but basically, it's the control center for this whole cellular cleaning process.
MTORC1-TFAB. I feel like I should be taking notes. So what are these, the supervisors of the cleaning crew?
Kind of, yeah. Think of MTRC1 like, how your house has a thermostat.
Sure, keeps things comfy.
Right. So MTORC1 senses when you've got plenty of energy from food and stuff, and it basically tells the house, in this case the cell, to conserve energy, maybe turn the heat down a bit.
Makes sense, but how does that play into fat and cleaning and everything?
Well, usually that energy conservation's a good thing,
Yeah.
but in NFLD it kind of backfires because it means those fat-burning garbage trucks, they're on a go slow.
Ah, so that's where TFEB comes in.
You got it. TFE is like the supervisor, right?
Mhm.
Normally it takes orders from MTORC1, but THC seems to interrupt that communication.
Like cutting out the middleman.
Exactly. It's telling TFE, hey, ignore the thermostat. We need those garbage trucks out there working overtime.
I love that. So THC is basically overriding the system, forcing a deep clean, even when our body thinks it's saving energy.
Exactly. And here's the best part. They didn't just see this in rats. They actually tested THC on isolated liver cells in the lab, in a petri dish.
Oh, wow. So it's directly impacting the liver cells themselves.
Yeah, and they saw similar results.
Yeah.
Which just strengthens the evidence that THC is doing something pretty remarkable here.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've got THC maybe acting like this cleanup crew booster, but, and I know you're thinking it too, this is just one study and with rats, right?
Right. We can't go running out to buy turmeric supplements just yet. Animal studies don't always translate perfectly to humans.
Definitely, but still super promising, right? Okay, so let's switch gears for a sec and talk about that second paper, the review on all those nutraceuticals. This one kind of puts those THC findings into perspective.
It does, and it emphasizes something really important for anyone dealing with NAFL or non-urethela.
Yeah.
It's usually not about finding one magic bullet.
Right, more like a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly.
In this review, it really dives into some interesting possibilities. There's this whole section on glycine. Yeah, it's an amino acid, and apparently taking it on an empty stomach, like absolutely nothing else, can have some surprising benefits.
Interesting. What kind of benefits are we talking about?
Well, it seems to impact blood sugar regulation. It's fine-tuning how your body responds to food.
Oh, wow. Okay, so kind of behind-the-scenes stuff, but still important.
Exactly. Then there's another section on soy isoflavones, those compounds you find in soybeans. They might actually mimic the effects of estrogen, which is super interesting because estrogen is known to be protective for the liver.
Especially against fibrosis, which is a huge concern with NASH. That scarring, It's no joke.
Right. This paper is like a buffet of possibilities. But, and you said this earlier, it's important to remember this is a review, so it's pointing us toward these promising avenues, but it's not presenting brand new findings like that rat study on THC.
Exactly. Think of it like they're giving us a map, highlighting potential routes, but we still need more research to see where those routes actually lead.
Okay, that's a great way to put it. So we've got one study showing some exciting stuff in rats, and then this review that's like, hold on, let's look at the bigger picture here. But how do these two papers actually connect, besides both being about liver health?
That's a great question. And there are some really interesting connections. Remember that mTORC1 pathway we talked about? The thermostat that sometimes needs a little override?
Of course. So important, that thermostat.
Right. Well, this review paper, it talks a lot about something called AMPK activation.
Okay, now that one does not sound familiar at all. Break it down for me.
So AMPK, it's like a rival thermostat, but also involved in regulating energy in the body. And here's the thing. mTORC1 and AMPK, these two thermostats, they're actually interconnected.
No way.
Yeah, they both play a role in how our cells handle energy and how they process fat.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. So we're not just talking about one pathway, one target, but this whole network that we're just starting to understand.
Exactly.
So cool. And if those two pathways are connected, then anything that affects one, like potentially THC with mTORC1, could have ripple effects on the other.
Exactly. It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, this is blowing my mind.
And a really cool thing is, while this review doesn't specifically look at THC and AMPK, it does highlight other natural compounds that show some promise in that area, like berberine. You ever heard of that?
Berberine rings a bell. Isn't that something used in like traditional Chinese medicine?
Yeah, it's been used for centuries, and now we're starting to understand why it might be so helpful for things like blood sugar control and liver health.
It's like we're building this whole toolkit of potential solutions, each one targeting a different aspect of these really complex diseases.
Exactly, and who knows what other tools we'll find as we keep digging into this research. And you know what's really fascinating? That THC study, it kind of hints at another piece of this whole liver health puzzle.
Oh, tell me more. You know I love a good puzzle.
Okay, so they specifically mention, like they say, more research is needed on how THC's effects on lipophagy. Remember the whole cellular cleaning thing?
Yeah, the garbage trucks.
Right. So how those effects might actually influence inflammation in NASH.
Okay, right, because chronic inflammation, that's a big part of what makes NASH so nasty.
Huge. It's like, imagine this fire that just keeps burning in the liver, and eventually you get scarring, maybe even cirrhosis.
And that's what we really want to avoid. So is THC putting out the fire?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. There's been all this new research showing a strong link between autophagy, which, remember, includes lipophagy.
Right, the bigger cleaning crew.
Exactly. So between autophagy and the body's ability to, like, regulate inflammation, keep it in check.
Wait, so you're saying our cellular cleaning crew, they're also firefighters?
Kind of. It's complicated, but yeah, it seems like autophagy can either make inflammation worse or help tamp it down, depending on what's going on.
Wild. Okay, so back to THC, back to our rat friends. What are we thinking?
So the researchers, they're suggesting that by boosting lipophagy, THC might not just be clearing out the fat, but also kind of indirectly influencing that whole inflammatory process in the liver.
So 2 birds, 1 stone. Love it when that happens.
Right. It's not just about cleaning up the mess, but maybe stopping the mess from even happening in the first place, or at least not getting as bad.
Okay, now that is exciting, but got to be that voice of reason here. We need more research, right, to really nail down exactly how this works.
Absolutely. Human trials, different dosages, all of that.
Yeah.
But still, it's a very promising lead.
Totally. Okay, so zoom out for a second. Big picture time. We're talking about a potential new way to treat NASH, which, let's be real, affects a ton of people. And right now, there's no magic pill, no FDA-approved drug that just takes care of it.
Exactly. And what's really cool is we're not talking about some synthetic, crazy, complicated drug here. It's THC from turmeric, something a lot of people already consider pretty safe and even beneficial.
Right. Like you can find turmeric lattes at practically every coffee shop these days.
Exactly. So, of course, more research is needed, but this could mean down the line we have more natural, maybe less invasive treatment options for NASH.
Okay, I am here for that future. Less invasive is always a good thing in my book. But I gotta ask, we talked about THC, maybe reducing fat, maybe impacting inflammation. What about fibrosis?
Yes, the scarring. That's a big one.
Right, because that can lead to cirrhosis, which is way more serious. So did either of these papers look at THC and fibrosis?
A good question. And honestly, neither of them directly address that connection.
Hmm, interesting. So if THC is potentially doing all this cleanup, reducing inflammation,
Hmm.
could it also be preventing or even like reversing that scarring process?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And it's definitely something researchers should be looking into. We know some other natural compounds, like you mentioned soy isoflavones earlier, they've shown some promise with reducing fibrosis.
So could we be talking about a combined approach, like THC plus soy isoflavones, tackling NASH from all sides?
Now, that is an intriguing possibility.
Right. This is what I love about these deep dives. It's not just about, here's the info, see you later. It's about sparking new questions, getting those wheels turning.
Exactly. And honestly, that's how science moves forward. We need those questions, that curiosity, to push for the next breakthrough.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so lots to think about. Clearly, more research is needed. But I want to end this section on a high note.
Always a good idea.
So, for our listeners out there, what's the key takeaway here? What should they be thinking about after listening to all of this? I mean, this whole idea of like using our body's own cleanup crew to fight NASH, that's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really speaks to this shift we're seeing in medicine, right? Moving away from just masking symptoms and actually trying to address those root causes.
Yeah, like instead of just slapping a Band-Aid on the problem, we're finally trying to understand the mechanisms behind it.
Exactly. And the empowering thing is, this deep dive, it shows how even small changes, like what we choose to eat, those nutraceuticals, they can actually make a difference.
Right. It's not about finding that one miracle cure, but giving our bodies the tools they need to heal themselves.
Exactly. But of course, always, always talk to your doctor before you start changing your diet or taking anything new.
For sure. Always good advice. Okay, so we covered a lot today, but hopefully our listeners are walking away with some like food for thought when it comes to their liver health.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And, next time you're at the store, maybe give that turmeric another look.
right. You never know. It might just be the start of a beautiful friendship, you and your liver.
I love it.
All right, everyone, that's a wrap on this deep dive into THC and NIHAsh. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time for more exciting discoveries in the world of health and wellness.